Welcome to Across the Balkans. Great to have you with us on the show. I'm Ludovica Brignola. Kosovo is now even safer. That's what Prime Minister Albin Kurti said after Turkish Bayraktar drones arrived in the country. Kosovo has purchased the unmanned aerial vehicles amid ongoing tensions in the country's north. The latest unrest in northern Kosovo erupted in May after Albanian mayors took office following a local election boycotted by ethnic Serbs. They refused to recognize authorities in Pristina and demand more autonomy. After violent clashes, Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic placed his army on combat alert and moved troops closer to the border with Kosovo. In response to Kosovo's Bayraktar drone purchase, Serbia's defense minister called Turkiye a major power with significant influence in the Western Balkans and said any conflict with Ankara wouldn't be in their national interests. Let's take a closer look.
These Turkish Bayraktar drones recently landed in Kosovo, and Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti was proud to share the military's newest hardware.
We have added Bayraktar TB2 drones to the arsenal of our army, which we bought as a government from Turkiye. In 2 years of governance, we have increased the number of soldiers by over 80% and the budget for the army by over 100%.
The budget also includes 5,000 regular soldiers and 3,000 reservists. Plus, NATO has 4,500 peacekeepers on Kosovo soil. That's largely due to increasing tensions in the north. In May, the country of 1.8 million people was once again challenged by direct clashes between ethnic Serbs and KFOR soldiers. And Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic moved units to the Kosovo border. The reason? The appointment of 3 elected ethnic Albanian mayors in the Serb-dominated north. About 50,000 Serbs live in the area, backed by Belgrade. Neither they nor Serbia recognize Kosovo, and tensions often boils over into violence. In 2011, Belgrade and Pristina saw the first step towards a normalization, but it's since been a case of 1 step forward, 2 steps back. The EU's High Representative, Josep Borrell's many interventions have prevented further tensions, but still, there's a long way to go. However, the EU isn't alone in advocating peace in the region.
Kosova ile Sırbistan arasındaki diyaloğu destekliyor, tarafların barışçıl ve yapıcı yaklaşımlar sergilemesini bekliyoruz.
The Turkish president shares close ties with both leaders.
Jemi gjithmonë mirënjohës për rolin e Turqisë në intervenimin e NATO-s në Kosovë.
A press release from the Serbian president's office published that month says President Vucic pointed out that Turkiye is an extremely important player for Serbia, not only on a bilateral basis, but also on the international political scene. He also asked the Turkish head of state to use his country's reputation and influence in order to maintain peace and stability in the region. In October, as part of a planned rotation, Turkey will take over the command of the NATO mission in Kosovo. Recently, some 500 Turkish commandos were deployed to Kosovo to quell the unrest. The region may now seem calm, but the problems are merely silenced and far from being solved. And it will have to wait a little while longer to see whether lasting peace could be a reality.
Let's bring in Angelusha Marina. She is a senior policy fellow at European Council on Foreign Relations and joins us from Berlin. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Angelusha, tensions between Kosovo and its neighbour have been on the rise over the last year, culminating with violence in northern Kosovo, where there's a large Serb minority, as we saw last month. Kosovo has accused Belgrade of inciting tensions, but I want to start by asking you, what's the latest on the ground?
So I think as of last week, there has been some kind of an agreement between Kosovo and the EU institutions, mainly the facilitator, EUSR, Lajčák, who also brought together 2 chief negotiators in Brussels last week. So it's not exactly clear what the agreement entails, but it looks like the parties are discussing to hold early elections in the north of Kosovo in the 4 municipalities to replace the current mayors because they don't hold they don't hold enough legitimacy because many inhabitants of the north did not partake in the elections held in April. So although we don't see protests every day and, eruption of violence has gone down a little bit, there still seems to be a lot of tension and so the light at the end of the tunnel is still not there. It's not being seen, although there are many, many efforts being taken.
Right, interesting. So potentially an agreement there for now.
That's right. So the agreement is from what one can read from the media is that they're talking about reducing, de-escalating is the word that they use, and holding these potential elections very soon before the end of the summer.
Okay,
but
all right.
It's not exactly clear. Yes.
Interesting. Potential early elections as well. And Lucia, I do want to ask a question on the drones themselves, because we know that Turkey is one of the world's top producers of drones and exporter. How is Serbia reacting to this? Because Kosovo's Prime Minister was quite vocal last weekend on this purchase, right?
Yeah. So just maybe a little bit of a background. Kosovo leadership has been attempting or has been making a lot of efforts to strengthen Kosovo security force. Mainly the way they see it is the Kosovo army. So this is not new. This government in particular has gone a step further and has signed agreements with Turkiye as early as 21. I think as soon as this government took power. So not only drones have been purchased, but there have been agreements for armored vehicles, for the training of the staff, and so on and so forth. In the meantime, Kosovo leadership, the current one, has increased the number of Kosovo security force personnel. So the increase has been up to 80%, but also the funding. They say, the government says that the funding has gone up 100%.
Right.
On top of that, they have also established a security fund, is how they call it, and this means that everyone is invited, in particular diaspora, to fill in this fund. I don't know the details ins and outs of this fund because it's not. I don't think it's very public so far. But this is the attempt. It's being the fund should be filled in so that the security forces. That is seen as an army of Kosovo will be strengthened even further.
Right, so a security plan is in place. A security plan is in place,
yes.
right, for now. And we were just looking at images of drones, right? Because the drones in question are Bayraktar TB2 drones. That's a model used most recently in Ukraine against Russia to great effect for what we know so far. What do you think are the capabilities of these drones and what sort of security can they provide?
So if you listen to the Kosovo leadership, their aim is basically defense. It's not that they're planning any particular action with these drones, but they want to strengthen the security forces just as a defense measure. So in order to defend themselves, apparently this is the main line. And this has a lot to do, of course, with the recent tensions, but not only recent tensions, but the tensions in general in the last 2 years. Again, just a little bit of a background. In September 21, there was the first clash of the kind that we see so far. And the Serbian army was put on alert and the military MiG jets were flying over the borderline with Kosovo, between Serbia and Kosovo, which was also seen as a breach of the NATO-Kumanovo Agreement of 1999. But still, I think this was the beginning of the series of conflicts that we see in the north of Kosovo, in which case most often we see Serbia bringing its army on alert or moving some troops around the border with Kosovo. So in a way, Kosovars are saying, or the leadership in Kosovo is saying, that they need to strengthen their security forces and they need to work towards the aim of defending themselves in a way. these are the steps to defend themselves rather than anything else. This is if you follow the rhetoric of this government.
Absolutely, and there was an escalation of tensions. It was very clear. But I do think at the same time, Kosovo is also trying to send a message to Serbia, but also to the broader region. What sort of message? And also, is there a real possibility that a war could erupt in this region?
Well, I think one of the messages is that Kosovo, and this is not anything new, Kosovo is really, really eager to bring its security forces in par with the requirements of a NATO membership. All the Kosovo leaders since the war have been saying this out loud and clear, that they are very interested to join Euro-Atlantic institutions. And NATO is one of the priorities. I think this is not new. This is not a novelty. Kosovo political class, be it the opposition or the governing institutions, are all 100% for joining NATO. So I think this is the first message. They want to get as close as possible to NATO membership, to any partnership programs that would bring Kosovo closer to NATO. This is the first message, I think, but also they want to, I think, again, I go back to the aim. They want to be ready. They want to make sure that they have some defense capabilities if it comes to the worst. But then here, I like to add a point. I don't think, considering that there are NATO troops in Kosovo in the form of KFOR, but there are also NATO troops in the region, in Bosnia as well. I don't think we would see an open conflict between Kosovo and Serbia. I think Serbia would also hesitate to go down that road. I'm sure that NATO officials, NATO commanders based in not only the region but also Europe are making it clear they will not allow this. So I would hesitate to say never, but I think it would be highly unlikely that we would see an open conflict between Kosovo and Serbia because of these parameters that I just mentioned. And maybe just to add, the security institutions are not really solely in the hands of Kosovars in Kosovo. There is a lot to be said about NATO presence in Kosovo, and Kosovo security institutions would need to consult, coordinate almost everything with the KFOR troops in Kosovo and with the NATO commanding line.
And
so
avoiding
this all.
Sure,
exactly.
Avoiding a conflict at this point in time will be very, very important as well, and not just for Kosovo and Serbia, right, for the broader region as well. On the other hand, stability seems to be in the Balkans, in this region as well, seems to be very important to Turkey itself. Why? Because Turkey has maintained a very strong presence in this area.
Well, again, I think this is not new. Turkey has been always interested in the stability of the Balkans, has been a major supporter of many fields in the Balkans, culturally, but also religiously, educationally, but also politically as well. And I think it's, of course, it's very important in the broader context that Europe finds itself in the political and security context. It's important that Turkey plays its role in Europe as well, but also in the region, considering that Turkey is also a NATO member and so on and so forth. But I think in the Balkans, there is a very strong message that Turkey has been sending. Recently, they fully support the EU or Euro-Atlantic integration of the region. And I think they're also sending messages that they are very willing to step in and help tame conflicts or even help find some lasting solutions, not just within the Kosovo-Serbia conflict, but I think there has been messages with regards to Bosnia as well.
Interesting analysis, Ingelusha Marina. Thank you very much for being with us today. And let's look at other stories making headlines in the region this week. Satellite images show the devastation caused by the wildfires on the Greek island of Rhodes. The fires have been raging in the region for a week, consuming more than 100 kilometers of land and causing approximately 19,000 people to flee. 2 pilots from a Greek water-dropping ship were also killed after their aircraft crashed during a firefighting mission. Bulgaria is set to send military equipment to Ukraine in their ongoing fight against Russia. The proposal was approved by Parliament late last week, allowing the shipment of Soviet-era armoured vehicles, weapons and spare parts to Ukraine. This would be the first time that Bulgaria is sending military support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war last year. And in Albania, archaeologists uncovered two prehistorical settlements which might be the oldest in the European continent. The two sites are in the country's southeastern region and are part of two separate expeditions conducted by Albania as well as foreign archaeologists. The United States has sanctioned the head of Serbia's intelligence agency for what it calls corrupt acts that facilitate Russia's malign activities in Serbia and the Balkans. The US Treasury Department says Aleksandar Vulin has been implicated in transnational organized crime, illegal narcotics operations and misuse of public office. It also accuses Vulin of maintaining ties with US-sanctioned Serbian arms dealer Slobodan Tezic and helping his illegal weapons shipments move freely across Serbia's borders. Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic has responded to the sanctions, saying it all has to do with Vulin's relations with the Russian Federation and not because he is a criminal. Vulin, a vocal critic of Western sanctions against Moscow, is also accused of handing over wiretaps of Russian opposition figures to the Kremlin. The accusations follow Vulin's recent visit to Russia, where he met Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The intelligence chief denies the claims and says he will file a lawsuit. Meanwhile, the Serbian opposition has called on Vulin to resign. Joining me now from Krakow, Poland, is Jakub Bielamovic. He is a Southeastern Europe and Western Balkans analyst at the Institute of New Europe. Thank you very much for joining us. Jakub, Aleksandar Vulin has been accused of a wide range of allegations we've just heard, implications with organised crime, but also misuse of public office, corruption, and also using his public position to support Russia. I just want to take a step back and ask you, what do we know about Vulin so far?
Well, Aleksandar Vulin has been well known as one of the most corrupt politicians in Serbia, and it does not suffice to say that he's pro-Russian because he openly demonstrates extreme pro-Putinist positions, and he has already held a number of cabinet positions in the government of President Vucic, most recently being the intelligence chief. And he also represents the regime at meetings in Moscow when President Vucic cannot go there. So he's a very important and trusted figure in his apparatus. And he's also a chief advocate of the Serbian word, Serbian ideology, which is the greater Serbian reincarnation of Putin's Ruski Mir imperialist policy. And I think as for the sanctioning policy itself, Vulin is certainly the right person to start with. And if the US is serious about its policy change with Serbia, I think further names should follow.
Right, so that's hardly news then. But what's the reaction been in Serbia itself, in the Serbian media? Do you think Vulin is at risk of being dismissed at this point?
So without any doubt, the designation of Aleksandar Vulin by the US Treasury has caused anger in Belgrade. It was received as a hostile act by Washington, and it is painful because, as I said, Vulin is one of the closest associates of President Vucic and also one of the key elements with his regime. And of course, President Vucic does not want to demonstrate weakness. Therefore, Vulin has not been dismissed yet. But I believe that it will be very difficult to keep him in his current office in the long run. That's why I expect him to be replaced as part of some broader government reshuffle or after one of the many early elections that take place in this country.
Right. On this very point, though, I mean, the Serbian opposition has called for Vulin to resign and be dismissed. What impact will these allegations have on President Vucic himself, who is so far, at least, standing by his spy chief?
Sure. So this is his first reaction because, as I said, he does not want to demonstrate weakness. So that's why it will be, I think, extremely difficult to have an intelligence chief who has been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury. It will limit his operational capabilities. So I think it has angered the President Vucic. It also came as a surprise, despite Vulin being one of the most corrupt, one of the most pro-Russian politicians. And it it has been very well received among commentators, among pro-democratic oriented forces in the Western Balkans, because we believe that this is the way forward.
So we need to keep a close eye on that and see what happens on that front, right? But meanwhile, Serbia has been trying to maintain a fragile balancing act between Brussels and Moscow ever since the Ukraine war started last year. First of all, can you help us understand why? What's the benefits for Serbia?
So, well, I think that this balancing act started long before Putin's de facto reinvasion of Ukraine last year. So I think there are at least a few aspects here. Firstly, Serbia has been highly dependent on energy resources from Russia. It has also been dependent on Moscow's political support in the UN Security Council on the Kosovo question. Furthermore, the Serbian society has for years been contaminated with the pro-Kremlin narratives. And Belgrade has even become a hub for Russian propaganda outlets and Russian companies that want to circumvent the Western sanction regimes. But I believe that under the current setup, it is almost impossible for the regime in Belgrade to turn away from Russia. So that's why I think it is a bit naive and myopic of the United States and also of the European Union to invest so much political capital into pulling Serbia out of the Russian orbit. If they are really serious about it, they first need to work towards installing a pro-democratic, pro-Western government in Belgrade.
It's interesting, Jakub, because you say essentially Serbia depends on Russia, at least economically. But could anything change now in terms of this balancing act that Serbia has been trying to maintain because of the recent US sanctions? And we'll see what will happen next.
So what I expect to happen over the coming days or maybe weeks is just another crisis in northern Kosovo or in Bosnia and Herzegovina, fomented by Belgrade. Because I expect President Vucic to be trying to discipline Washington back into the appeasement mode, as this is, in my view, the core of the Western stabiliocratic policy towards the Western Balkans, so which is the appeasement of authoritarian, aggressive regimes at the expense of democratic, reform-oriented government. And Vucic and other Kremlin-aligned players in the region know these tactics very well, and that's why they continuously escalate to de-escalate in return for concessions from the West.
What about the European Union? How does it fit, I wonder, in this geopolitical picture? And also, do you think that Europe would follow suit after US sanctions?
So I firmly believe that the EU should follow suit, as the EU sanctions would be even of greater importance, as many of the most corrupt and Kremlin-aligned politicians in the region have their assets not in the US, but in the European country. And this is also where they mostly travel. But as we know, the EU foreign policy, including the sanctions, is being held hostage to the unanimity rule, which is in turn being held hostage to illiberal regimes within the European Union. And first and foremost, Hungary, that basically coordinates the network of Kremlin-aligned actors in the Western Balkans and shields them from sanctions. But recently, we have also learned about Austria opposing such restrictive measures. So therefore, as commentators, as think tankers, we call for a coalition of the willing from among the EU member states that would impose bilateral sanctions against the most reactionary elements in the region. And I firmly believe it's a matter of credibility, any credibility of the EU foreign policy towards the region.
Right, a matter of credibility, right, you say. And I wonder, would this in any way affect Serbia's accession to the EU? How would it be affected?
So the EU accession process has been basically dead for quite some time. So Serbia, of course, declares the willingness to follow the EU path, but it does not really want to integrate with the European Union under the current government, because it would require deep reforms of the country, also removing the most pro-Kremlin, pro-Russian elements from the government. It would also need to declare a serious battle against the corruption in the country. So this is not happening, and this is unlikely to happen under the current government. So I do not expect this particular designation by the US Treasury to have any significant impact on the regime. I think because despite many woes that the regime in Belgrade is facing, it still remains rock solid. But I think the regime has become very nervous recently because of the declining popularity of the governing party, not necessarily because of the sanctions that have been declared by the US Treasury, but most importantly by the street protests that have been taking place in Belgrade week by week since the beginning of May. So that's why President Vucic is trying to launch a new quote-unquote people's movement. And he handed over the party leadership to his close associate, Defense Minister Milos Vucevic. Let's see how it further develops.
And we will see, and we're unfortunately running out of time, but thank you very much for being with us today, Jakub Bielamovic. And that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.